All right, so today we're going to talk about a little REBT and then a lot of your favorites, a little CBT. Yeah, we're getting after it. Keep in mind that this, so I got my phone, but it's got my lesson plan on it, so I'm not like, checking my Insta or anything like that. But keep in mind, this lesson was obviously created for in-person instruction, and we are not in person. So, we'll take a look at them. Maybe we'll see if there's something, a way you can practice it on your own, or maybe something to keep in mind, or something to think about, or maybe walk through a scenario in your head, or even if you get the chance, see if you could practice with somebody. But I really like, it's always interesting when I do REBT because I think about this post-secondary counselor that he's retiring this year, or, if I use this video again in 2026, and I had to interview him for my doc program. And, when sometimes with school counseling, what happens is we kind of get in this groove of things and we don't really think about theories, and we don't really think about, I don't really associate with a theory, or, sometimes maybe because, we want to be that eclectic counselor that can kind of take a little bit of everything. We're like, I don't really have a theory. But it was cool because as I was talking with him and I was asking him some interview questions, it was like, Paul, you really align with REBT. So it was, when he's from a post-secondary lens with students. So that was pretty cool to see. I like this quote here. We do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. And I think that kind of just gives that perspective of, where we're at. It's, really thinking about what we've experienced, and maybe not necessarily what we've experienced, but how we process those experiences that really shape who we are and how we see things, how we view things. So pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So where'd this all start with? Started with our homie, the man, the myth, the legend, Albert Ellis. Again, right? He was one of those people that, came from another approach. He was a psychoanalysis, but he was like, you know what? It's we got to move things a little quicker, right? It's moving too slow. We're taking too much of a, just kind of coasting through cruise control. And he really wanted that kind of educational, maybe even psychoeducational approach. He was the one. He really thought the events, like I said, the events in our lives aren't the things that upset us, but it's how we process them, how we believe they are to be, how we see them. Think about that, right? Think about if you and a friend were ever at a same event, same concert, same social function, same sporting event, same whatever, and just think about how maybe even take it one step further. Think if you've ever been in an argument with someone, and think about how different your two perspectives are, right? Even though the exact same thing is happening and you're both there, it's how you perceive it is different than how your friend perceives it, right? Going back to what Ellis said here, it's not the events in our lives that upset us, but it's our thoughts and beliefs. And then, on this page 377, there's a quote from Buddha: "What we think, we become." And kind of following that line of thinking is, it helps people identify and change irrational thoughts. And we kind of talked about that last week when we were going through, the individual psychology, where it was really, how I process things, or, how I view things, or those I think it was called like irrational truths or something. I'm having a little bit of a brain fart right now. I apologize, but just my perception of things are how I think things were. So yeah, kind of coming back here, I kind of jumped the gun. I identify and change irrational thoughts that cause emotional behaviors. And just our reality is kind of what we are, what we think. I think that's pretty, again, I don't want to jump to conclusions or make assumptions, but I think that's a pretty easy concept to kind of associate with children, right? Like I'm thinking, you couldn't hear it, but my next door neighbors, I'm guessing mom told the kid he couldn't do something and he was just wailing. And that's why I was waiting to record this. And I'd have to imagine if you asked the two of them what happened, maybe he had some irrational thoughts or didn't believe what happened really happened, and he's going to have a different view than his mom. So I could definitely see how this could be pretty useful in using it with children. Excuse me. So kind of like how we talked about last week with solution focused, how they see people. How do REBT people see people? That's a weird way to say it. REBT people see people. If we're operating from a lens of REBT, tendency to think both rationally and irrationally, right? It's kind of both ends of the spectrum. Like, what's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? It's all or nothing thinking sometimes. And then we got this cycle, it's irrational thinking that this is discussed in the book. You have the irrational thought, which leads to hate, self-destructive behavior, hatred of others. Then we have the example from Frank. Right? He engages in irrational thinking. So then self-hate, he hates himself. Self-destructive behavior, he hates others, and others react irrationally towards Frank. And then think about your own world. Think about where you have maybe, been on one and just you're not feeling great about yourself. And as you reflect back, you could see how it maybe impacts how you treat others. Maybe treat, but like it doesn't, but not meaning like you're hitting them or anything, but like you might be a little more colder to them. I think about, this last year has been pretty rough for me. And people, when I told them what was going on, they noticed. Throughout the year, people have been saying, you're a little more introverted, a little more quiet, you're not as sociable. Something's just a little, And so when I definitely can see myself going through that circle. I can definitely see a kid going through that circle. I can think of my daughters when they're not feeling great about themselves, especially my youngest. How short she is and how that fuse is just lit and boom, boom, boom. And, acting out, wailing, like accidentally hurting herself. And then she starts taking out on her sister and starts yelling at me. And so, and then I think, but it's important to also think about this next one. The goal isn't to be happy all the time, but to handle difficulties without becoming emotionally disturbed, right? I think, we talked a little bit about how, one of the best things you could say to a kid is, I don't know. But it's also important too to validate feelings. I told you guys about this, my neighbor who, they were telling me about, how work is expecting so much and not getting a raise and da, 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 da. And at the end, they were like, yeah, but that's kind of, first world problems. I shouldn't complain compared to others. And I was like, don't compare yourself, right? Like validate your own feelings and validate other feelings. And I think that's what this is, all right, here comes the Kool-Aid. Am I? Like, that's why with affirmations, when I do my trainings, I have a GIF of the Salt Bay. You guys remember him, Salt Bay? But it's a funny cartoon because as he's sprinkling, there's hearts coming out. And so there's a quote that says, like, affirmations are like salt. The right amount makes something great, something along those lines, but too much salt could ruin it. And, I think trying to get someone, whether it's a kid or an adult or whatever, just be happy all the time. Everything's fine. Oh, that's not bad, right? That's okay. right? Kind of taking solution focused and taking it too far. That's not this. This is still saying like, hey, there can be times things suck and they're tough and it's difficult. And I'm not going to paint this picture of, oh, it's not that bad, because then it's not validating your feelings. So I think with REBT, they believe like, yo, life's gonna throw you some curveballs, but the most important part is how do we handle those curveballs, right? Like, what are we gonna do with them? So that's why I really like this, is that, oh, and then we have the power to choose which thoughts we follow. Again, you're gonna find this with just about every theory, dare I say every theory, is that autonomy is the big deal. Like, hey, you have the choice to do this, that, or whatever. You have the choice for X, Y, and Z. But going back, I really like that part of REBT, because it allows for someone to be upset. It allows for you to not be happy. It allows for you, pardon my French, to piss and moan, right? But it's also recognizing that and not letting it become too much of, try circle. That's that cycle up there, right? The irrational thinking, the hating themselves, and just kind of going on and on and on. So we got the ABC model. This is at the heart of REBT. And it's really, it's pretty linear, right? This quote up there, A doesn't cause C, B causes C. So that's what's really big on this, is REBT is all about, I feel like I'm Aretha Franklin going RESPECT every time I say REBT. But the big point with this is that the event is the event. You do not have this consequence because of the event, right? Kind of going back, and where did it say it? It's not the events that cause it's not the events in our lives that upset us, but our thoughts and beliefs about the event, right? That's why you can have like people who experience two different things, and one person thinks it's great, one person thinks it's terrible, one person thinks it's this, one person thinks it's that. So the thing happens, the event, right? Whatever that event may be. But then it's how you sort of react to it, how you process it. What do you tell yourself about the event? Like, this example is just helping paint a picture. Obviously, it's got a school theme to it. I failed my math test. I'm a total failure as a person. And then the emotional and behavioral result of your belief, feeling depressed and giving up. So again, with REBT, we're saying, it makes me think a little bit, not apples to apples, but like there's this guy, Warden, and he has this thing called the 4 domains of grief. Obviously, I run a grief group. And he has one thing, and I'm, kind of simplifying it and paraphrasing, but he's like, when someone passes, you don't miss them. And let me start by saying, I don't 100% agree with this, but I think it paints a good picture. He says, if someone passes, mom, dad, friend, spouse, whatever, you don't miss them. You miss what they provide for you. So not a lot of times, what he thinks is that it's almost like you could get all that again, but it might be, by committee. Like I think about my father, I would argue I miss him. I don't miss what he provided, but if I did believe this, I would say, okay, so like dad did this for me. So now this thing he provided for me, I can get from my mom. This other thing he provided for me, I can get that from my friends. This other thing I can get from X, Y, and Z. So it's very similar to this, right? Where it's like, I don't miss my dad. I miss what he provided. This is saying you don't act because of an event. You act because of how you process it, how you believe what's going to happen next because of that. So like right here, you aren't feeling depressed and giving up because you failed the math test. You are feeling depressed and giving up because you are processing that you're a failure. You believe you're a failure because that happened. Does that make sense? So this was an activity we were going to do. This is going to say we're often upset with ourselves with rigid demands we place on ourselves. Brainstorm some common shoulds or musts you hear from friends and family or even yourself. Right? So with this, what I'd want you to do is think of some, just, I'm going to ask you to pause the video for about 5 minutes and just think of all these shoulds, musts, oughta, right? It could be about school, could be about health, could be about fitness, could be about social life, could be about love life, could be about jobs, whatever. But just take a couple minutes, and obviously we're not going to share them, but just want you to think about them and think about how maybe they have shaped your behaviors. So right now we're going to pause, and then we're back. So hopefully you paused. Hopefully you took some time. Hopefully this gave you some good kind of examples of, or good things like kind of shaping who you are or why you act the way you do because of things you hear from maybe other people or a lot of times ourselves, right? The loudest voice we hear is ourselves. If I believe I ought to do this and I ought to do that and I must be this and I must be that and like, yeah, that's going to really impact who I am or who I become. So this is in our text, page 382 to 383. Take a look at it, but I wanted to give you a couple examples. I'll pull a couple out. One was, I must be loved or approved by everyone. Things are awful, terrible, and catastrophic when I am frustrated or treated unfairly. It's easy to avoid life's difficulties rather than facing them. So how could these impact the counseling relationship? Right? These are very rigid or illogical, and a lot of times they might not match reality. Think about what you're, it's kind of funny because sometimes I feel like there's my natural response, which is, probably aligned to the ABCs, right? Where this is my belief about it, but then there's my counselor response. Think about when someone is saying these and how you might want to react to it. How could that impact the counseling relationship? So then we got irrational beliefs, right? Irrational beliefs. These rigid systems of thoughts have patterns that lead to emotional problems. Frustration and tolerance, these are some, this is one of our keywords from this unit, refers to the perceived inability to withstand the frustration of the activating event. One other thought pattern that creates upset is human worth ratings. Those beliefs evaluating self, others, or the world as not ever enough and therefore worthless. Giuseppe reminds us that people cannot be rated as either good or bad because it's impossible to be completely one or the other. Oh, I can't read that word. Some, I'm guessing it is. Some other patterns of thought that lead to problems are I can't stand it or always and never thinking. Giuseppe provided a table that, do I have it in my notes? I really got to prepare better for these this happens in my other class. Anyways, so you could see that, right? It's like perceived inability. All of this is perception, right? When I have that perceived inability, it creates the frustration that's the B, right? And then human worth ratings, right? Always thinking you're never enough. This is never enough. Situation's never enough. Person's never enough. Environment's never enough. Think about that kid in that photo right there. If she's having these thoughts, yeah, she's not going to be feeling great. And then we have the Common irrational beliefs. These are across some age groups. So for children, I pulled out a couple. For children, page 384, it is awful if others don't like me. I am bad if I make a mistake. Everything should go my way. And it's kind of funny hearing these. I'm hearing some stuff from some of our other units or theories we've discussed. Right? Obviously, that first one, again, and I think I brought this up a lot, is that how soon or how much, how the brain's social emotional processing develops before logical. So, yeah, if others don't like me, that's gonna play a role. That's gonna be a strong B, right? I think someone does it. The activating event is I perceive someone doesn't like me, and in my head, I'm saying it's awful. I'm bad if I make a mistake. Everything should go my way, right? That almost is like that sort of invisible, kind of like that invisible audience, or that the spot. I remember when I talked about my youngest when she was the teacher's assistant, and she was kind of running the show, so everything had to go her way. Again, for children, if I think everything's I have that concrete thinking where it's like, this is my view, this is my worldview. I'm not quite open yet to other people's perspectives. So if it doesn't go my way, it's wrong. Then we get to adolescence, some other ones. It would be awful if other kids did not like me. Again, that is, that social aspect. It's my parents' fault that I'm so miserable. Think about the example I just gave. The kid didn't get what he wanted, and obviously it's not going to be his fault. It's mom's fault. It's dad's fault. Children, when I could kind of, when I'm not internalizing it, I want to be able to point a finger. It's your fault. Then it's better to avoid challenges than risk being a failure. This isn't quite with children, but what this made me think of is I was watching, if you guys know that show Hot Ones, where it's Sean Evans. He's actually a U of I grad, so he's from Illinois, I believe. Grew up. I mean, I don't think he came to Illinois just to go there, but he might have. But anyways, he had an episode with Jason Sudeikis. I think I was watching it when I watched it when I was at the ASCA conference in Kansas City, because I remember he talked about good barbecue places, because Kansas City is known for the barbecue. And I remember he was talking about, he kept on telling people that he didn't want to be on Saturday Night Live because it was almost like a safety net for him. It was almost like if I say I don't want to get on SNL and then I don't get on SNL, it doesn't matter because I didn't want it anyways, right? And that makes me think of this last quote. It's better to avoid challenges than risk being a failure. So instead of saying, I want to do this, kids might be like, you know what? If I think I might not make it, I'm just going to maybe downplay it or say it's dumb. And then for parents, right? How does this work for parents? These irrational beliefs. I must be a perfect parent. I mean, I'm a perfect... I don't know if those exist, right? You try your best. You learn from mistakes. You act with your kids' best interests in mind. And then my children make me angry, depressed, and anxious. Right? That's the B. That's your kids are doing something and you are perceiving that they are doing that because they did that, this, and this. All right. So we got A, B, C, and now we got D and E. This is us. This is where we come in. This is where the counselor challenges the irrational belief. Let's challenge it. Let's put it in its place. Right? We're disputing it. This is since it's active and direct educational therapy, like this is where we jump in. Like, where's the evidence that failing one test makes you a total failure? How is that belief helping you? Right? I've done that sometimes where I've been like, you're saying you want this, but I'm just a little confused with how that is getting to your goal of wanting whatever, right? Um, Again, you're getting them to think different. Now, obviously, with this, you got to tread lightly because you want to challenge, but you also want to validate and respect them. And then we got the new philosophy. This is more rational, flexible thinking. This is where we're understanding. For kids, a lot of times it's understanding that a life event is just that, an event. It's not the rest of everything. It's not, it's not because, it doesn't always have to be this way. It's just like right here. I'm disappointed I failed the test, but it's not the end of the world. It just means I need to study differently next time. Right? So, I mean, D can lead to E. Like, like if I'm thinking about the test, I'm thinking about school. So, it sounds like you failed this test, but you said this class is important to you and you want to do this, that, whatever. But, that test isn't showing that. Is what happened? Well, I said I was going to study and I didn't and I failed. But you know what? It's just one test. I've got time to make it up. Next test, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So something like that. But yeah, that's where we come in with REBT, where it's like, okay, I'm almost hearing a little bit of solution focused in there, kind of where it's like, or with a lot of these theories where it doesn't have to be this way. Like, what are you going to try different now? And then what's our role? I might buy that suit. That's Mr. Counselor right there. How you doing? All right. So the relationship is important, but it's not the main tool for change. Right? This might go against what some of our theories have told us. Counselor's like a teacher or a coach. Humor challenges clients. Unconditional self-acceptance. You are worthwhile simply because you are a human, not because of your failures, not because of your successes or failures, right? So that unconditional self-acceptance, that's the big one, right? That's the big, understanding you're going to have these events and really you're not a failure. You're just processing it as you're a failure. You're just processing it as because this happened, that happened. That's why I'm going to be direct. That's why I'm going to challenge your thinking. I'm going to get you to try to think differently. And I'm going to give homework, right? I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to try these new behaviors, practicing rational thoughts. Kind of, like that first quote said, our realities are not necessarily what really happened, but it's how we perceived what really happened. And I kind of one way I use this is I'll say to kids, hey, you know what? If you don't have bad days, you don't know what good days are. And keep in mind, it's a day. It's a bad day. It's not a bad life. It's not a bad year. It's a bad day. So let's think about that and let's process it. And how do we make it not a bad day? Another activity, right? So your friend is applying for a part-time job and they really want. After the interview, they don't get the job. They say, this is a catastrophe. I don't know if any kid talks like that, but whatever. I'm so stupid. I'll never get a job. I can't stand this feeling of rejection. So as the counselor, come up with two disputing the D's questions, to challenge their irrational beliefs. help them come up with a more effective rational belief. One thing you could even do, all right, we're going to pause the video. I'm going to give you a chance to pause the video for a second. One thing you could even do is honestly find Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, Groot, whatever, and copy and paste this in there and have it give you some feedback, see what happens. So, or otherwise just think about it or try it with a friend. So, think about as the counselor how you would dispute this and how would you challenge the irrational behavior. Okay. So pause. And we're back. Hopefully you took some time to do that. I'd love to hear next week if any of you did plug it into an AI and what the results were. Maybe if you want to copy and paste it or screenshot it, that'd be cool. Yeah. So 7 factors to detect irrational thinking. What are the 7 factors? Number 1, overgeneralization. Right? What do we mean by overgeneralization? Kind of that all or nothing thinking. It's always going to happen. Everyone that does this, everyone this happens to, every, right? Distortions, deletion. But I think these are pretty. We could pretty much think about these and understand how these play a role in that, right? So, or how these are things we would hear that how this is an irrational thinking. Like the big one, I think is as you get with teenagers is the fortune telling, right? Because I did this, I'm not, I'm thinking of again schools, and I'm thinking about right now we're in our seniors are graduating, and we have next year's juniors where we've gotten we're doing course we're fixing schedules right now, right? We're tweaking things for next year, and I'm having kids that are planning on continuing their education after high school, and they're thinking, I'm having to call them down and, okay, so this didn't work, that didn't work, we got to tweak your schedule a little bit. And in their head, some of them, especially those that are applying to very competitive selective schools, they think, oh, I have to take a gazillion AP classes and I have to try to get my PE waived so that I can go to this school. And yeah, as a former PE teacher, I love hearing that. But, and I challenge that irrational fortune telling thinking, because I tell them, listen, I had a student that took a study hall every year, was in band every year. And 2 years ago, she graduated from Harvard. And now she's in med school. So it's really challenging that, you can practice self-care. You can have a life. You don't have to be irrational and think, if I can't get in all these classes, I can't go to this and my life's a failure. So that's probably the biggest one I hear with kids. So think of an example of this, right? So we're gonna walk through this, and I want you to kind of walk through one on your own. So at the activating event, this is just, I'm going to walk you through this, right? But I want you to, we're going to pause. I want you to take like 3 minutes and try to walk through one on your own. Hopefully that didn't make a loud noise. So we have, Maya saw pictures on social media of her friends at a party she wasn't invited to. Her belief was, this is horrible. It means they all hate me now. Her consequence was she felt depressed and worthless, anxiety about seeing her friends at school. She was angry and jealous. As a counselor, I was the D and the E, disputing, where's the proof that your friends actually hate you? Is there another possible reason why you weren't invited? The E, getting her to think, I'm really disappointed and sad I wasn't invited. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to be sad about it, but it does not necessarily mean everything you're saying it means. So just take a minute, and we'll take 3 minutes and see how many different scenarios you could walk through and how many maybe you could be like, oh man, I've gone through those. Okay, so pause. And we're back. That was silly. I'm sorry. All right. So working with kids and adolescents. So different techniques maybe have to be a little, as I think the key phrase I've been saying over and over again has been the walled garden, right? The walled garden. This can work with younger kids, but you got to kind of adapt it a little bit, right? So for children, concrete activities, role playing, stories, and puppets, right? That sounds a lot like play therapy. Again, I'm not going to tell you too much about play therapy because I wouldn't be doing my job because I haven't experienced it too much. So I would definitely say something to look into. Focus on helpful and unhelpful thoughts rather than rational and irrational, right? Imagine you're working with a 5-year-old and you say, that's an irrational thought. They're going to be like, huh? What? So again, I think with any theory, with any approach, with any fill in the blank here, that might even be something used with some adults. I think, you want to use language. What was the expression I said? Don't use $5 words where $2 words will do. Like using language that can help understand what you're trying to do, what you're trying to get them to think about. Role reversal, great technique, right? So, I think about, I'll be honest right now, I am focused. I'm talking to you, but I have my outdoor TV on. Got the playoffs on, the NBA playoffs. And I think about how many kids I see, like just, I think about when I used to coach girls basketball versus boys basketball. Girls basketball was great because many of the times you're coaching basketball players. Boys basketball players, they see something that I don't want to paint with a general brush, but I'd say more times than not, they are more likely to be impacted by what they see on TV, right? I think about when I was a kid, everything I saw Michael Jordan do, I tried to do on the court. Or younger kids are like, hitting fadeaways going Kobe, right? So I say that to say they're very impressionable. So maybe you might have to show them, hey, let me show you what self-talk is. Let me show you a different way to think about it. And then you try it. Then as we get older, they could handle a little more abstract thinking, may respond well to humor and discussing what their peers might think, right? Obviously, I feel like this will almost be like a bingo game, right? Like the social and emotional part of the brain develops quicker than the logical, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, so yeah, if now you can get them to think, hey, what might your friends think about this? It might hit a little more. It might be a little more impactful. So, how does this work? Is it effective? Yes, queen. Research shows positive outcome, wide range of issues. And then diversity. Yeah. I'm just reading that and just letting it sit in for a second, right? You might have some cultures. You might have some groups even within cultures that are like, we talked about last week where it's like you might have the parent that is like, hey, fix my kid, right? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with your kid. Don't say fix. It's just they need some support with something. So, but with cultures or groups that understand that it's a consultant and don't want that and want that person to teach their kid, not tell their kid, might be good. And then the unconditional acceptance of self and others works against bias and intolerance. So again, it's very similar to a lot of our other theory, very similar to client-centered, I think. And I like the message of you're not a bad person. This isn't a catastrophe. This is really how you perceive it. And that's really what's going on here. So that's REBT. I am going to get my notes ready, my lesson plan, and now we are going into, ladies and gentlemen, give me a C. Give me a, oh, I can't do a B. B, T. CBT. A lot of you align with this. A lot of you like this. I could tell you, those of you that are school counselors, if I was a betting man, this is probably the theory you are most comfortable with or aligned to. Now, whenever I see it, I think of the show Shrinking, because their center is called, I believe it's called the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Center or something like that. So yeah, let's dive into it. Let's talk about it. Let's do it. Here we are. So what is it? It's all about the idea that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors, not external things like people, situations, and events, right? There's a reason that we are covering 2 theories this week that end in B and T, because they're behavioral. You're hearing a lot of this, probably you're hearing similar with REBT. It is not, and someone said it in class where it's retraining your brain to think and process different. It is not actual things that are causing our feelings. It's how I perceive those things, how I process those things, how those things make me feel. And we want kids to identify and change their unhelpful thinking. So, again, negative thought patterns to enhance emotional regulation. If we can change our thoughts, right, we can change how we feel. If you're working with a younger kid, you can think about being a quote unquote thought detective, right? That's again another example of just the language you're using to level it down for children. And then the man, the myth, the legend, who is behind this all, Aaron Beck. I mean, it's a solid bow tie. I think I actually ran this image through AI. I'm trying to remember to kind of clean it up, because that looks like it was taken yesterday. So yeah, the fun fact, originally psychoanalysts, but moved away from it, right? Similar to Ellis. Both of these guys were grounded in being psychoanalysts, and then they're like, you know what? Don't think I quite like that. So different mental health challenges have specific thinking patterns. We could target those patterns. We can create lasting change and the team effort, not confrontational, right? So that's good, where it's like, hey, if I'm working with you as a counselor and I'm coming from CBT, I'm not focused on the event. I am focused on how you think about it, how you process it, where you're coming from with it. And team effort, again, and similar to REBT, people that are going to like it are the ones that want the teacher, want the education, don't want, you tell me what to do. We work together. And then we got this cognitive model, the core concepts. It's an iceberg. We usually start by noticing automatic thoughts and work our way down. So I'm going to give you some examples. The automatic thought, quick in-the-moment thoughts or self-talk. I'm going to fail this test. And then we're going to move down, intermediate thought, rules or attitudes we live by. So I think I'm going to fail this test. And then I go down, it's like, if I don't get an A, I'm a failure. And then our core beliefs, the fundamental beliefs we have about ourselves, the world, or others, often formed in childhood. Ooh, wow, that's a big mess up there. I gotta clean that up. Once formed to childhood, often formed in childhood. And this is that I am incompetent or I am unlovable, right? And we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about like attachment theory, when it was, I had that cartoon or that YouTube video of the woman whose husband passed, and she had the 3 different children and how they were raised differently, and how the attention they got and their attachment to her, how it kind of played a role in who they became. So yeah, I think, we usually start noticing the automatic thought, and then we kind of work at, like, the top of the iceberg is kind of like what it is, but then below it is the why. Like, why am I thinking this way? So we would add a group discussion, but now I want you to do this on your own. It'll take about 5 or 10 minutes. Think about a recent time you felt stressed or upset. Maybe it was this week because you weren't going to see me in person. Wah, wah. What was the situation? What was the automatic thought you had in your head? And then take a couple minutes and share with the partner, and then we'll discuss. So we're not going to get to do that part, but I want you to just kind of process this. So like in this example, it was, I'm going to fail this test, and then it worked its way down. Think about this on your own. Think about the thoughts that popped in your head. Maybe work yourself down the iceberg, and then just take a minute to think about, as we're moving forward, if you were counseling yourself, how would you change those thoughts? How would you get in the way? So take like 5 minutes or so. Pause. Boop. I was going to try to do pause, follow up, but I still did it because I'm dumb. All right. So when our thinking gets twisted, cognitive disorders, right? If you're talking to a kid, we could call it stinking thinking. Put this in bold because it happens. Cognitive disorders are common, unhelpful thinking patterns that are often not based in reality. Couple examples: all or nothing thinking, catastrophe, mental filters, overgeneralizations. Right? I'm not going to read them. You could read that, but I want you to think about, have you ever heard a kid say this? Well, let's take it one step further. Some of you guys, right? I've heard you talking about assignments or things from other classes. Have you had any cognitive distortions with any of these where you have thought all or nothing, catastrophe, mental filter, overgeneralization? Let's take a minute and think about that. They're common. And we can understand not only that they're common, we can understand why, number one, why someone might feel this way. Is this mic still on? Yeah. And then number two, how it could get in the way of things. So we got some scenarios. So I just want you to think about these, right? We would have done these together, but we're not together. Wah, wah. Okay, so a child plays a soccer game and scores a goal, but misses one shot. All they can talk about after the game is the missed shot. Which one do you think it is? I'll tell you the answer in 3, 2, 1. Mental filter, right? They are not focusing on what went right. They are focusing on what went wrong, right? Maybe trying to get them to focus on the goals. Again, that could, maybe be creeping into solution focus, things like that. Scenario 2. A teen asks someone to the school dance and gets turned down. Oh. They think, no one will ever want to go out with me. 3, 2, 1. Overgeneralization. Making a broad conclusion based on one event. One person said no. You're a catch. There's plenty of fish in the sea. All right. And then the last one. A student is worried about an upcoming exam and thinks, if I fail this test, my life is over. I'm never going to college. 3, 2, 1. Catastrophizing. Worst case scenario. Now you might think overgeneralization, but overgeneralization is kind of something's happened already, right? Catastrophizing is expecting something bad's going to happen, and just the butterfly effect, snowball effect. So what's the counselor's role? I think I had this woman, because I remember that collar. I think I had this woman for another slide in a different one, but it's a team, right? We are a team. Relationship is key. It's collaborative. Empathetic or empathic, however, whatever word you want to use there, right? No, empathetic, right? Like I said, you're going to look, and a lot of times that's the biggest determining factor in the relationship. Counselor, think of the counselor and the child as co-investigators, right? Teaming up. Key phrase, collaborative empiricism. We are a team testing out the child's thoughts against reality. So it's, what is the reality? How are you perceiving it? How is that getting in the way of things? So what's a typical CBT session look like? Check in. What's up, bro? Setting the agenda, right? What are we going to talk about today? Collaborative. What are we talking about? Homework, right? CBT, one of the big traits in CBT is giving that homework. Like, what did you notice or practice since last time? Maybe even bring up, hey, last time we talked about you were going to try ba 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 ba. How did it go? Work on a skill problem. This is the bulk of the session, right? And there's different techniques within CBT that you can use to try to work on it. Like we talked about earlier with kids, modeling might be a good idea. New homework, right? So now it's getting them to, either challenge more of that thinking you worked on, or maybe there's a different aspect you want to challenge. But really with CBT, it is, hey, again, just like REBT, it's not the event that happened or not the thing that happened. It's how I'm processing it. So how am I going to process it? And then summary, maybe even reflect, some would say. What'd you take away from this? So now what's in our toolbox? Socratic questioning, right? We said that again with REBT. Those BTs, they hang out together. Counselor acts as a curious guide, asking questions to child, help examine their thoughts, not an interrogation. It is so easy for a counseling session to turn into an interrogation, no matter what theory you use, what approach you use, right? So remember, you're using these questions to help them think about their own thoughts. Guided discovery. Oh, sorry, I have some examples of Socratic questioning. What are the evidence for that thought? Kid, you might not want to say evidence. Like what's happened that made you think that? What's showing that that's the right answer? What's the worst that could happen? Could you survive it? Right? And trying to get them to see it's not too bad, or if you wanted to flip it, what's the best that could happen? And then guided discovery. Counselor coaches the child on a voyage of self-discovery to find their own answers. This could tell you a lot about the student, the client, the child, the fill in the blank here. It's going to get to give you kind of like their worldview, their beliefs, their values. All right, again, partner, not going to happen. Again, you could copy and plug this into AI, or just kind of imagine scenarios on your own. Scenario, I'm not going to the party on Friday. No one will talk to me, and I'll just stand in the corner by myself. It's going to be so awkward. So use that Socratic questioning. Remember, examining their own thoughts. A couple examples we had from the last slide. What is the evidence for that? Is there any way to look at this? What's the worst that could happen? Could you survive it? Don't give advice. Just ask gentle, curious questions, right? Because when we give our advice without permission, then our bias tends to creep in. And I'll stop talking like this. So pause for 5 minutes. And we're back. Anxiety and depression. Anxious feelings and challenging about the what if, right? The what ifs drive everything for kids. A program called Coping Cat is very effective. Education, relaxation, coping skills, and gradual exposure to what they fear. Right? That gradual exposure, right? Like getting to think about it more and start to realize how much they can handle it. Students with kids, any clients, sorry, I keep saying students, tackle or with depression, tackles the cognitive triad of depression: negative views of self, negative views of the world, negative views of the future. Right? These all could kind of fall into the B and the C of the ABCs of REBT, LMNOP, QRSTUV. Focuses on changing these core views and increasing pleasant activities, right? So instead of why this is going to go wrong, how can we change our thinking? How can we make this right? Anger and ADHD addresses distortions, like someone intentionally bumped into you in the hall. Oh man, you you'd be surprised in a high school how much that comes up. Someone, they did that intentionally. Okay, let's maybe they did, right? And again, that's that validating, but let's take a look at it and see what's going on. Problem solving skills and ways to reframe the situation. Okay, they could have bumped into you on purpose, but I just want to take a minute, and before we jump to that conclusion, can you think of how maybe this wasn't intentional? Like, give me some reasons why this might have been just, it happened on accident. ADHD helps children with self-instruction. What do I need to do first? Self-monitoring and managing impulse. Right? So if I could think about, I need to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, it might get me to slow down and process. Play therapy. Again, there's some cool stuff in the text about it. Take a look at it. Adaptation that uses play puppets and games to teach CBT. Those of you that are well versed in CBT, think about how you could turn this into a game or an activity or play with kids. Group discussion. Can't do it, but again, just want you to process. Why is it so important to adapt these techniques like using play or worksheets when working with children versus adults? What could go wrong if you just tried to talk to a 7-year-old like a 30-year-old? And I don't think we need to pause or spend time on that. I think, spend time on it, but I think we could all think about why. They're not little adults. It's the using big words that I can't process. It's me not understanding what's going on, me not feeling valued, heard, me being talked at instead of talked to. It's a couple of reasons. So, I think the play kind of maybe eases it and gets to their level. So some core takeaways. Our thoughts shape our reality. That's been kind of the theme of this week's video. Thought detective to identify and challenge unhelpful thinking. Distortion. Right? It's not what's happening. It's not what's happening and this is why. It's that part in the middle. I need to figure out what my thoughts are. We're going to work together. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to be the expert. It's collaborative. It's proven to help with some different approaches, right? Or some different challenges we might be working with. So, keep that in mind and remember to make it fun and developmentally appropriate. Here's where you would give me some thoughts. These are pictures of brains. Why not? I'm guessing a lot of you are on board with this because it seems like whenever I bring up, theories we align with, it seems like CBT comes up a lot. So for this week, I don't know why it says DB6. I think we just have, let me pull up the syllabus real quick. No, we have the interview with the counselor. If you aren't able to find someone, please shoot me a text or email my D214 email account, just because I'll see that first. And then quiz 7. Hope the symposium was great. And have a lovely rest of your week. I'm going to stall so that this video is exactly 1 hour long. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have a good day.